I was 27 when I held Nathan in my arms for the first time. His tiny fingers curled around mine, and in that moment, I knew my life had changed forever. My husband, Joel, had passed away 2 months before our son was born. A sudden stroke. 1 minute we were decorating the nursery together, and the next, I was a widow with swollen ankles and no clue how to carry on. But I did. I worked nights at a diner and cleaned houses during the day. I gave up sleep, comfort, and the quiet evenings I used to dream of, just to make sure Nathan never felt poor, never felt alone. He was my reason. I missed parent-teacher meetings sometimes because of double shifts, but I never missed birthdays. I made his Halloween costumes by hand. I stayed up late sewing patches on his jeans so kids wouldn't make fun of him. We had our own little world. He used to say, "Mum, you're my favorite person." Every time I packed his lunch with a surprise note inside. I never dated, never remarried. Not because no one asked, but because no one mattered more than Nathan. When he got into college, I cried more than he did. I sold my wedding ring to help pay for his tuition. I told him it was just an old piece of jewelry. The truth? It was the last thing I had from Joel, but Nathan needed books and rent more than I needed memories. He promised me the world back then. "Mum, I'll make you proud. I'll take care of you one day." And he did make me proud. He graduated top of his class, landed a big job in finance, and before I knew it, he was flying to meetings in other states. He'd call me after landing. "Did you eat today?" he'd ask. "Take your vitamins?" But slowly, those calls became texts, then shorter texts, then silence. When he met Erica, his future wife, things changed. She was sharp, fashionable, the daughter of someone important. When I first met her, I wore my best floral blouse and brought her a homemade peach cobbler. She smiled politely, but never took a bite. I told myself it was nerves, that she'd warm up. But she never did. Nathan started dressing differently, speaking differently. He asked me not to post old baby pictures online because his co-workers might see. Then it was, "Let's do Mother's Day next weekend, and I'll swing by when I'm less busy." I understood. Life moves fast. But I never thought it would move away from me completely. When they had their first child, my first grandchild, I wasn't invited to the hospital. I met her a week later for exactly 14 minutes in their pristine living room where Erica smiled with closed lips and Nathan kept checking the time. Still, I tried. I bought clothes for the baby, sent casseroles when I knew they were tired, and left voicemails that never got returned. I told myself this was just a phase, that once things settled, I'd get my son back. But I didn't. Instead, I got something else. Something I never saw coming. A ride to a beautiful facility with glass windows and cheerful staff. A short stay, they said, just until the remodel at their house was finished. Nathan promised he'd be back to pick me up in 2 weeks. I waved goodbye with a smile and my suitcase in hand. But inside, something didn't feel right. I felt like luggage being stored, and I had no idea that this goodbye was meant to last forever. The nursing home was beautiful on the surface, calm music in the lobby, spotless floors, smiling attendants. The kind of place that tried very hard to feel like anything but a place where families dropped their burdens. The receptionist smiled warmly when I arrived. "Room 304, Ms. Olivia. We've been expecting you." Expecting me? That was the first clue. But I brushed it off. Nathan had always been organized. Maybe he'd called ahead. Maybe he really was coming back for me. The first few days, I settled in. I met Dolores, my chatty neighbor with 5 grown kids and a sharp memory. I unpacked my bags, hung up the 2 framed photos I brought, one of Joel, one of Nathan as a little boy. I kept my phone close, waiting for the call I thought would come. It didn't. Not the next day, not that week, not even a text. I called Nathan, straight to voicemail. I texted him. No reply. At first, I gave excuses for him. Maybe he's traveling again, I told Dolores. He's busy with work. After all, he was always busy. Too busy to return casserole dishes. Too busy to bring the baby by. Too busy to take me to lunch for my birthday last year. But this time, it felt different. The nurses were kind. They showed me how to get around, helped me sign up for bingo nights and art class. But every time I asked when I'd be going home, they looked confused. "Is there someone I should call, Olivia?" "Yes," I said softly. "My son." One of the nurses finally said, "There's no discharge date in your chart. It says long-term placement." I felt the blood drain from my face. Long-term? I sat in my room for hours after that, staring at the 2 photos I had brought. One of Joel, strong, proud, the man who would have never let this happen. And one of Nathan, 6 years old, holding my hand in the backyard while we blew bubbles together. I picked up my phone again, called, voicemail. That night, I cried for the first time in years. I had always told myself I was strong. I'd faced worse. I had survived widowhood, poverty, and loneliness. But this wasn't grief. This was abandonment. A week later, a box arrived at the front desk with my name on it. Inside, the rest of my belongings, my winter coat, my favorite mug, a few recipe books, no note, no explanation, just the silent confirmation of what I already feared. I wasn't coming home. Nathan had left me here, like a forgotten suitcase in a hotel lobby, dropped off with no intention of being picked up again. Dolores saw me unpacking the box. "What kind of man does that?" she muttered. I didn't answer, because I didn't know. All I knew was that something inside me cracked that day, a piece of me that had clung to hope, to loyalty, to the belief that love from a child was unconditional. It wasn't. Nathan had changed, and maybe he'd been changing for a long time, but he made one mistake. He thought leaving me here would be the end of my story. He didn't know I was just getting started. After the box arrived, reality set in like cold wind through an open window. I wasn't here by accident. This wasn't temporary. Nathan hadn't just gotten busy or distracted. He had made a choice, a deliberate, cowardly choice to shut the door on his own mother. I kept telling myself there had to be a reason. Maybe Erica pressured him. Maybe he thought the facility was good for me. But when I looked around at the quiet halls, the wheelchairs lined near the common room, and the echo of lives waiting to be remembered, I knew better. He didn't want me in his life anymore. Not the way I was. Not as the aging, wrinkled version of the woman who once carried him for 9 months, who patched his jeans, who skipped meals so he could eat. I was no longer part of his image. I didn't fit in with the wine tastings, luxury vacations, or polished in-laws. I was clutter. And he filed me away, neatly, legally, permanently. What hurt most wasn't the act itself. It was how easy it had been for him. No conversation, no explanation, no moment of hesitation before erasing me like an outdated contact in his phone. The staff began treating me differently too. "Olivia, your son's payment has been received for this quarter. Let us know if you need anything. We'll contact your son if there are any issues." He was paying for everything, apparently, and in doing so, he'd handed himself the right to control everything without facing me. I started noticing details. The emergency contact form had only his name, not Erica's. My power of attorney paperwork, He had filed it 2 years ago after I sprained my wrist. At the time, I thought it was precautionary. Now I realized it gave him full authority over all my medical and financial decisions. He hadn't dumped me here out of desperation. He had planned it. I became obsessed with retracing the signs I had ignored, the moments I waved off as stress or fatigue or change. I remembered how he reacted when I brought up living with them after retirement. The awkward smile, the vague deflection. I wasn't useful anymore. And that's when something inside me began to shift. I started paying attention. Not to him, but to myself. My instincts, my history, my strength. I had been more than just a mother once. I had been resourceful, sharp, resilient. If Nathan thought placing me in this home was the end, then he didn't know who he was dealing with. Because while he had walked away without a second thought, I was just getting started on the long walk back to myself. The worst part of being left behind isn't the loneliness, it's the shame. I spent days in my room staring at the same walls, the same blinking light on the call button, the same photo of 6-year-old Nathan grinning at the camera with chocolate on his cheeks. It became a kind of slow suffocation, like being buried under everything I had ever done for someone who decided I didn't matter anymore. Every time a nurse knocked gently and asked if I wanted to come down for bingo or painting class, I smiled and said no. I was too proud to cry in front of anyone. But every night when the halls were quiet, the tears came. Silent, steady, bitter. And worst of all, I kept blaming myself. Maybe I was too clingy. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe Erica really had a point when she called me out of touch. I replayed moments I thought were innocent, but might have annoyed them. The time I reorganized their kitchen cabinets when I stayed over. The time I posted a baby picture of Nathan in a bubble bath. Did those little things really add up to abandonment? The truth landed slowly, like raindrops turning into a flood. It wasn't about what I did. It was about how easy I was to erase. One morning, Dolores found me in the common room, just sitting. She dropped her crossword puzzle in her lap and said, "He hasn't called yet?" I shook my head. "Not once." She grunted. "You know what that means, don't you?" I didn't answer. She leaned in closer. "You don't need to say it, but you're not alone, Olivia. This place? It's filled with mothers like us, grandmothers, aunts, women who gave everything and were told to stay quiet once we weren't useful anymore." Her words pierced something inside me, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. That night, I stayed up scrolling through the outdated tablet they provided. I started Googling things: legal rights of seniors, power of attorney laws, care facility consent forms. Nathan had signed everything. He'd done it years ago, slowly, quietly, making sure I had just enough comfort not to ask questions. I felt like a guest in my own life. And yet, something new stirred inside me. A whisper of the woman I used to be. The one who budgeted every dime to get Nathan through school. The one who worked 2 jobs without complaining. The one who used to fix broken furniture with a butter knife and duct tape. That woman wasn't gone. She had just been buried. Under guilt, under grief, under years of loving people who didn't love her back the same way. So I started writing things down. Everything I remembered about my financials, the insurance documents, the house I'd sold to help Nathan with his first business loan. I made lists, notes, timelines. And then one day, Dolores handed me a folded paper. Her daughter, Rachel, was a lawyer. She visited every Friday. Dolores had told her my story. "She's willing to talk to you. No charge," Dolores said, winking. "We older women have to stick together." For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day Nathan walked away. A spark. It was small, fragile, but it was mine. Rachel came the following Friday, just like Dolores said she would. Young, sharp, polite, but with a fire in her eyes that reminded me of the woman I used to be when I was fighting for a better life with a toddler on my hip and $2 to my name. She sat with me in the courtyard under the shade of an old oak tree and listened, really listened, as I told her everything. From the day Nathan brought me to the home, to the unopened box of my belongings, to the quiet months that followed. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pity me. She took notes like she was building a case. At the end, she said calmly, "He took advantage of your trust, Olivia. But he didn't cover all his tracks." That one sentence opened a door in my mind. Over the next few weeks, we met regularly. She helped me access digital records, bank statements, retirement accounts, property records. I had forgotten just how many things I had co-signed for Nathan. Small business startup funds, a property under both our names, and even a line of credit tied to my social security. All things I had done out of love, out of faith. But love without respect turns into a contract built on sand. And now, I was ready to reclaim every grain. Rachel filed paperwork to freeze my name from being used further. She helped me reassign power of attorney to a neutral third party, and she began the slow, steady work of disentangling my finances from Nathan's grasp. But that wasn't all. She also helped me set up something new, my own account, my own will, my own structure of independence. "Olivia," she said one day as we finalized documents, "he thought putting you in a nice place would be enough to buy your silence. But he forgot you're not just anyone. You're a mother, a survivor. And now you're a client." I laughed for the first time in months. Dolores started calling me the comeback queen. And soon, other women in the facility began asking to join our little courtyard meetings. Widows, retired teachers, forgotten grandmothers. We shared stories. We gave advice. Some of them hadn't seen their children in years. Others were still paying rent on homes they technically owned, but weren't allowed back into. So I started writing again, not just journaling, but compiling stories. Our stories. Stories of women who gave everything and got left with nothing. And with Rachel's help, we began planning a local seminar, Rites of the Aging, when care turns into control. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were reclaiming. One afternoon, I sat alone with my notebook, staring at the photo of Nathan I kept in my drawer. The little boy who used to curl up in my lap and ask me to sing his favorite lullaby. The boy who said, "I'll build you a castle one day, Mommy." He didn't build me a castle. He built walls to keep me out of the life I helped him create. But now, brick by brick, I was building something of my own. Not revenge, legacy. By the time summer rolled in, I was no longer just Olivia in room 304. I had become someone else again, someone I hadn't seen in decades. I was Olivia, the woman who got things done, who asked questions, who wasn't afraid to take back what was hers. Rachel and I had filed every form needed to separate me from Nathan's tangled web of gifts and obligations. She found loopholes, overlooked details, and even uncovered something shocking. I still had a 25% stake in the property Nathan used for his main office building. My signature had been part of the original purchase agreement. He'd never removed my name. When I saw the document, I stared at it for a long time. My name, right there, beside his. He had buried it under years of silence and legalese, hoping I'd never remember. But I did. We filed a formal claim. No lawsuits yet, just a warning letter. Enough to send a chill. Enough to remind him I wasn't gone. That same week, Nathan called the facility. The front desk buzzed my room. "Olivia, your son's asking to speak with you. Should I patch him through?" I paused, then said, "No." That was it. One word. One boundary he couldn't cross. The staff began to notice the change in me. The nurses who used to knock softly now asked for advice. I helped write grant letters for a fellow resident's daughter trying to get into nursing school. I started a weekly tea group in the sunroom. Not gossip, just space to talk about life, to remember who we were before they called us residents. The seminar Rachel and I planned gained attention. We pitched it to the city library as a free event. Legal tools for seniors. We expected 20 people. 74 showed up. Rachel stood beside me as I spoke. Me, a woman once abandoned in a nursing home without a word, now speaking into a microphone with strength I didn't know still lived inside me. I told them about co-signing without clarity, about power of attorney and how love doesn't mean blind trust, about how financial abuse often hides behind polite conversations and smiling betrayal. After the talk, people waited in line to shake my hand. One woman whispered, "You told my story, but you told it louder than I ever could." And yet, through it all, I never mentioned Nathan's name, not once, because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about every woman who had been quietly erased and then decided to write herself back into the story. At night, I sat by my window and watched the stars, wondering if Joel would be proud. I think he would. Not because I fought back, but because I did it without becoming bitter. Nathan still hadn't shown up, no calls, no letters. But I knew from Rachel that things weren't going well. His company was struggling. A lawsuit from a former client, rumors of poor bookkeeping. He had built fast, but not strong. He never expected that the mother he discarded might rise while he fell. And I didn't celebrate his downfall. But I didn't rescue him either, because this time I had rescued myself. I hadn't heard Nathan's voice in nearly a year when the facility director gently knocked on my door. "Olivia, there's a call for you," she said, her expression careful. "It's about your son." My hands went cold. The next few minutes were a blur. The hospital social worker explained that Nathan had been in a car accident. Serious, but not fatal. Internal injuries, broken ribs, a concussion. Erica wasn't listed as his emergency contact. I was. I almost laughed at the irony. After everything, I was still legally tied to him, still part of the foundation he quietly built with pieces of me. My name was still there, just not my presence. I didn't rush to the hospital. I didn't call back right away. I sat quietly in my chair, staring out the window, trying to figure out what I felt. Was it anger? Relief? Grief? Number? It was something simpler. Distance. That was the moment I realized I had truly moved on. When I finally called the hospital, I confirmed he had someone else to care for him. Erica had shown up eventually. No, they didn't need me to sign anything. Yes, they had updated his contacts. Good. He no longer needed me, just as he'd wanted. Still, something in me stirred. Not pity, not forgiveness. Just closure. I asked Rachel to find out more, quietly. Through her connections, I learned Nathan's business had collapsed. The lawsuit had gone public. Investors pulled out. His name, once respected in finance circles, now floated in gossip columns and bankruptcy rumors. And the office building? The one where I still owned 25%? He'd tried to sell it behind closed doors to cover his debts. The paperwork never went through. Because of my name. He had to contact me. The letter came a few weeks later, written in Nathan's familiar handwriting, though shakier than I remembered. "Mum, I know I don't deserve a response. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to know. I see it now. All of it. I treated you like a transaction, like someone I could file away when it was convenient. I thought success would make me feel strong, but I only felt whole when I knew you were proud of me. I was ashamed of where I came from, of being the boy with the mother who wore patched shoes and made lunch from leftovers. And now, I'd give anything to sit with you again in that tiny kitchen, eating whatever you made. If you never write back, I understand. But if you ever think of me, I hope it's not with hate. Love, Nathan. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of my drawer, not to forget it, but to remind myself, even those who hurt us most are still human, still flawed, still capable of regret. But regret isn't redemption. And my story wasn't about his guilt. It was about my healing. That week, I hosted another seminar, bigger this time, hosted at the very same office building Nathan once owned. Yes, the one with my name still on the deed. Rachel helped organize it. Volunteers helped set up chairs. A group of seniors from the facility came wearing Team Olivia pins. As I stood at the podium, I looked out at the crowd. Not just grey heads and tired hands, but strong faces. Faces that had been through things. Faces that understood. I was left behind, I told them. But I outlived the people who tried to write me off. Not just in years, but in purpose, in strength, and in voice. And they clapped. Not for the woman who had been placed in a nursing home, but for the one who had risen from it. It was early autumn when I finally saw Nathan again. The hospital had discharged him weeks earlier. He was walking with a cane now, thinner than I remembered, eyes sunken with exhaustion. He hadn't returned to work. There was no company left to return to. Erica had reportedly moved back in with her parents. Their house? Listed for sale. Quietly. Desperately. He came to the nursing home unannounced. The front desk rang me. "Olivia, it's your son. He's asking to see you." I hesitated. Then I said, "Give him 10 minutes." No more. When I stepped into the lounge, he stood the moment he saw me. He looked older. Or maybe I had just stopped seeing him through the eyes of a mother. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. I didn't answer. He sat back down slowly. "I didn't think you'd come." I sat across from him but said nothing. He took a deep breath. I lost everything. The business, the house, my reputation. I thought that would be the worst part. But it wasn't. He looked up, eyes wet. "The worst part was knowing you didn't pick up the phone, that you had every reason to hate me and you didn't even bother to yell." Still, I said nothing. Nathan lowered his head. "I was cruel. I was selfish. And I didn't just leave you behind. I erased you, because I thought success gave me the right to rewrite history." I leaned forward, my voice calm but cold. "You didn't just erase me, Nathan. You erased everything I sacrificed. You turned a lifetime of love into a transaction." He nodded. "I know. I don't expect anything. Not forgiveness, not help. I wanted to see you, to say I'm sorry, and to say thank you for not letting me destroy you." I studied him for a moment, and for the first time in years, I didn't see my son. I saw a man, flawed, broken, finally aware of the damage he caused. But awareness doesn't rebuild trust. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked quietly. It wasn't the abandonment. It wasn't the silence. It was realizing that I gave everything I had. Years, love, loyalty, and in return, I was stored like furniture because I didn't fit your life's new aesthetic. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "You don't need to say anything else. You've said your piece, and I've lived mine." He nodded, tears finally slipping down his face. I won't come back, he whispered. But if there's ever a day you think of me, I hope it's not with hatred. I stood up, adjusted my cardigan, and said simply, I don't hate you, Nathan. I outgrew you. Then I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. He couldn't, because some goodbyes are spoken without doors slamming or voices raised. Some goodbyes are quiet, final, and necessary. Back in my room, I made myself tea and returned to my writing. I was nearly done with the book Rachel and I had started, The Forgotten Women, Stories of Strength After Silence. Nathan's name wasn't in it, because this wasn't his story anymore. It was mine. After Nathan's visit, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even replay the conversation over and over like I might have months ago. I simply moved forward, like turning the page on a chapter that no longer served the story. That evening, I finished the last sentence of my book. It had taken almost 6 months of note-taking, rewriting, and painful remembering. But I did it. The Forgotten Women wasn't just my story. It was Dolores's. It was Mabel's, Ruth's, and Irene's. Women in the facility who had once sat silently in wheelchairs or by the windows, now sharing their stories like war veterans comparing scars. We submitted it to 3 small publishers. 2 weeks later, I received an email from one of them with the subject line, "We're honored to publish your voice." I stared at the words for a long time. Me, Olivia, discarded, invisible, unneeded, published. Rachel helped me set up a small bank account to hold the royalties, which I decided to split with the women whose stories were featured in the book. It's not about profit, I told her. It's about proof that we existed, that we mattered. And people noticed, not just the residents in the facility, but families, children and grandchildren who'd been distant now calling more often. A few even wrote me letters. Thank you. I didn't realize how cold I'd become to my mother. Reading your story made me drive 2 hours to see my grandma. You reminded me what love without honor really looks like. The home invited me to speak at a local university for a panel on aging, dignity, and intergenerational respect. Students in their 20s sat and listened to a 74-year-old woman talk about the sharp edge of being forgotten. I wasn't left in a nursing home because I was weak, I told them. I was left there because someone thought my love came with silence. They clapped. Some cried. One young woman approached me after and whispered, "I haven't seen my mum in months. I'm going to fix that today." It wasn't just healing for me. It was a ripple. Nathan didn't call again. I didn't expect him to. But I heard through Rachel that he had taken a job at a small firm, much lower level than his old position. Erica had moved on. There was no mansion now, no image to uphold. Just a man, stripped bare, finally living in truth. And I wasn't surviving anymore. I was thriving. The last thing I did that year was buy a small stake in the very nursing home I had once been dumped into. It wasn't expensive, just enough to give me a say. To start a program called Second Voice, a legal and emotional support group for elderly women navigating betrayal, financial abuse, or abandonment. It grew fast. Not because we had marketing or big donors, but because there were more of us than anyone ever admitted. One day, a new resident arrived, frail, quiet, ashamed. Her daughter had left her there without warning. I sat next to her on the bench outside. "I know how this feels," I said softly. She looked at me. "How did you get over it?" "I didn't," I replied. "I built something with it." And that's what this was now. A legacy, not written for the people who left us, but for those who still needed to know they could rise. Winter arrived with quiet snow and warm blankets, and for the first time in years, I welcomed the stillness. I no longer stared at the door waiting for visitors who would never come. I no longer checked my phone hoping for missed calls. I no longer watched others go home for the holidays while I sat wondering what I had done wrong. I had stopped waiting. Instead, I lived. I woke up every morning with purpose. Writing, mentoring, helping new residents reclaim their voices. I had a room filled with thank you notes, emails, and even photos from families whose lives had shifted just from hearing my story. One afternoon, the administrator of the facility called me in. "We've had an anonymous donation made in your name," she said, her smile wide. "A full wing of the home will be renovated for women in emergency care. They asked that it be named the Olivia Unit." I blinked. "Are you sure?" She nodded. The donor left a note. She didn't just survive, she taught others how to begin again. I never found out who it was. Maybe a reader, maybe one of the students, maybe someone who saw themselves in me. But it didn't matter. I had once been placed here to disappear. Now I had left a mark no one could erase. Rachel brought me a printed copy of The Forgotten Women the week it went into second printing. She handed it to me like it was made of gold, and maybe it was. Because in those pages was everything they tried to silence. Our pain, our stories, our truth. As I held the book in my lap, I whispered to myself, "You did it. Not for Nathan, not for revenge, but for every Olivia who'd ever been forgotten." The final visit from Nathan came almost a year after the accident. He didn't come inside. He sat in his car outside the facility for nearly an hour. I watched from the window as he stepped out once, then back in. He never rang the bell. He just looked up at the building, then drove away. He never came back. And I was okay with that. Some sons come home. Others only return when they need something, and some were never really ours to begin with. But I had stopped measuring my life by who stayed. I measured it by what I had built when no one was watching. By spring, I had started a second book. The title? After They Left. Because they did. And I was supposed to fade. But I didn't. I planted roots. I became unforgettable.